Welcome to the 5th Indy Ref Weekly Review, bringing you a roundup of news you maybe missed every week until the Scottish independence referendum in September. This week, Scottish agriculture suffers under the Union, Milliband threatens border controls, and more voices join the debate. First, new research from Patrick Dunleavy, Professor of Political Science at the London School of Economics, suggests that the setup cost for an independent Scotland could be as low as £200 million, with up to an additional £400 million over a 10-year period. Dunleavy claims that the £600 million estimate would be the maximum cost altogether to set up Scotland as an independent country. Now, you may remember that the UK Treasury recently misused previous figures from Dunleavy to claim that an independent Scotland would cost £2.7 billion, before retracting that figure after Dunleavy pointed out that they had completely misrepresented his work. And in true UK fashion, they've done it again. Reports from BBC Scotland News stated that Dunleavy was now agreeing with the Treasury's estimated setup costs of up to £1.5 billion, causing Dunleavy to come forward again and say that this was not a figure I accept. But okay, let's say for a second that setup costs actually were £1.5 billion. The estimated cost to refurbish the Houses of Parliament in 2015 is at least £3 billion, and at most 10. We can get a whole new country for less than half the cost of just refurbishing the Houses of Parliament. And the fact is, we can afford it. A report published 3 years ago by a leading professor of economics, Andrew Hughes Hallett, confirmed that Scotland has actually been subsidising the UK. In fact, records in the National Library of Scotland have shown that since the year 1900, Scotland has contributed more to the UK than it received back. The UK will tell us that through the Barnett formula, we receive more funding than other parts of the UK. And that's true, but it's because Scotland currently has 8.4% of the population in the UK, yet we raise 9.4% of annual tax revenue. We raise £1,700 per head of population, but we only get £1,200 back. And now, worries are being raised by Scottish academics that if we vote no, we would likely see our funding cut even more by a UK government that already believes we get back an unfair proportion of tax revenue. Now let's have a look at the chart. This is where wealth is currently generated across the UK. You can see strong levels of wealth generation across the Central Belt and in Aberdeen. And this is where the wealth of the UK ends up. That's the true cost of being a part of the UK. Last year, statistics showed that Scotland had hit record levels of investment, with the economy in Scotland recovering faster than the UK average. Both the independent newspaper and the independent business group N56 have published articles this week explaining how an independent Scotland could be one of the wealthiest countries in the entire world. Links below. Now, as part of Dunleavy's report, he also applauded the Scottish Government's plans for the transition to an independent country, stating that the Scottish Government has a great record in public management and that their outline was relatively specific and reasonable. He went further to say that the main current uncertainties arise from the London Government's apparent reluctance to do any planning for or to make clear to Scottish voters how a transition to independence would be handled at their end. It seems that anyone who tells you that we'd be worse off in an independent Scotland is either misinformed or lying to you. Much of this info comes from the Business for Scotland website. If you are undecided or a no voter because you're worried about the economic impact of an independent Scotland, then get along to one of their meetings, links below. I defy you to still be in doubt afterward. In a boost to the numbers of supporters of the Yes campaign, this week UNISON, one of Britain's largest trade unions with over 1.3 million members, came out in support of independence and signed a declaration of support for an independent Scotland as a route to a fairer society and economy. A report published by UNISON Scotland stated that we believe that through self-determination we can begin to tackle inequality and create a fairer Scotland whose human and natural assets will be used for the benefit of all rather than the profit for a few. Now, this story came out in the same week that, in contrast, the Orange Lodge officially registered with the Electoral Commission as campaigners for a no vote. Now, you see, this got me thinking, so I had a wee look at who was on each side of the campaign. Now, on the Yes side, we obviously have the SNP and Yes Scotland, but also the Green Party, the Scottish Socialist Party, the Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, UNISON, trade unions, and Labour for Independence, which includes former Labour Party Chairman Bob Thompson, as well as Sir Charles Grey, Alex Mawson, Carol Fox, and John Mulvey. Now that list doesn't even include the hundreds of grassroots groups such as National Collective, Women for Indy, Generation Yes and Business for Scotland. Meanwhile on the no side we have Better Together and the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, the rest of Labour under Ed Milliband's leadership, UKIP, the BNP and now the Orange Lodge. If you are undecided, honestly ask yourself, why is there such a clear political divide between those who support yes and those who support no? Which side would you rather be on? The news comes in the same week as the Radical Independence Campaign's national mass canvass that hit over 40 locations across Scotland with over 1,000 volunteers. They've just published results showing that with undecideds removed, we're looking at 57.6% support for yes and 42.4% for no. This is only one of many polls coming out at the moment that show yes has overtaken no. This week in Project Fear, the ongoing campaign to keep you scared of independence, Ed Milliband raises concerns over border controls in an independent Scotland, stating that a Labour government in Westminster would consider building border posts if Scotland votes for independence. Polls suggest that there is no chance of a Labour government in Westminster anytime soon, but let's put this myth of borders between Scotland and England to rest anyway. Here's the border between Denmark and Germany. This is Belgium and France, Portugal and Spain, Norway and Sweden, the Netherlands and Germany, and finally, between the UK and the Republic of Ireland. And yes, many of these countries have different immigration policies, so precedent suggests that only an idiot would build border posts between Scotland and England. Sorry, Ed. And now on to the final section, it's the fact of the day. One of the key claims in the UK government's recent booklet sent out to every home in Scotland at a cost of £750,000 to the taxpayer was that as part of the UK we have greater representation in the world than if we went independent. At the moment the UK has 73 seats in the EU, out of them Scotland has only 6. Malta has the same number despite being roughly 1/10 the size of Scotland. Now as an independent country we'd have greater representation. However, the booklet also claims that the UK are best placed to protect agricultural interests in Scotland as a result of this greater representation. But here's the thing. Westminster's representation of Scotland's farming community has been so poor that we receive only 22.5% of the rural development funding levels that Ireland gets. The current situation was made even worse last year when Westminster decided that millions of pounds worth of funding that was awarded to the UK from the EU, specifically to go to Scotland's farming communities, would actually go straight into the UK Treasury instead. The funding, which was awarded to the UK only because of Scotland's unique agriculture, would have provided farmers in Scotland with an extra €60 million a year until 2020, but Westminster is keeping it. Still think we're better together? That's everything for this week's IndieRef Weekly Review. Links to everything I've spoken about are below. If you have any questions that I can deal with in future videos, please send them over to indierefcommunity@gmail.com. I'll be bringing you your IndieRef Weekly Roundup every week from now until the referendum in September. You can follow me on Twitter @StephenPayton134. Thanks for listening, I will see you all next week, and remember, don't hate the media, become the media.